Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Ismael Traore, and I am zooming in from South Vancouver, which sits on the territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Stalo, and Chamainus people. My colleague Melanie and I have the privilege of being your co-hosts for this evening as members of the Multicultural Advisory Council of BC. The Multicultural Advisory Council, or MAC for short, was created to provide advice to the Minister for Multiculturalism on issues related to anti-racism and multiculturalism. The Council also performs a variety of duties and functions as specified by the Minister as set out in Section 5-1 of the Multiculturalism Act. We are pleased to welcome you to the 2020 British Columbia Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism Awards ceremony. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's an honor to be part of this event that will be recognizing so many inspiring people who are working every day to create a safer and a more welcoming and inclusive BC for all.
I have the pleasure of sitting as the co-chair of the Multicultural Advisory Council. I want to acknowledge that we're here today gathering virtually and also situated geographically across many Indigenous nations in Turtle Island, or what we know as Canada. I'm joining you today as a settler on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh as well. I want to invite you all to take a moment to think about the Indigenous lands that you're on and the histories that allow you to be here. To begin, I would like to welcome Questin, Musqueam Knowledge Keeper, who will officially open and close our ceremony tonight. Good evening, Questin.
My apologies. Hajka Melanie. Hajka Melanie Ismail. Thank you, Melanie and Ismail. Siam Nasiaya, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Ichan Shoayas. I trust you are all well. Amitsep Kwitwilam to Musqueam Osh Thomas. Welcome to Musqueam sacred land. To Shwamats to Hunkaminam, the cradle of the Musqueam Hunkaminam language. Isha Sansle, Nam to Siaya to Squamish. To Tsleil-Waututh, and the home to our kin from Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh. Hi, Tsepka to Swalop with Alap with Atanaskakip. I want to thank you all for joining us from your different locations with your different strengths that you bring to this gathering, the 2020 British Columbia Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism Awards. Last year's commitment by the province to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples brings due acknowledgement and respect to the traditions, customs, and land tenure systems of First Nations. And also allows us to expand the territorial welcome to do more than share our land. It gives us an opportunity to share our culture with you. In Musqueam law, all people are related. No matter who you are my siaya. You are bound by kinship to me. So this may be a Musqueam history I will share with you, but when we complete implementation of the UN Declaration, it will also be your history. I'm going to share with you a story from Musqueam's past, from a previous pandemic, before the Spanish flu, before COVID-19. This is called The Child of Sorrow. Long ago, but not that long ago, there was a young lady who was beset by a terrible misfortune. Her people died, and only she and her young son were left alive. in a big, empty longhouse. Every morning she would get up, filled with sorrow, and she would climb the hill behind the house, where there was a bent tree that sheltered moss and grass, and she would sit there and she would nose would run, and she would wipe her face and wipe her hand off on the moss. Or old people called this deep mourning Ewam. It's deep grief. And every day this young lady would go to the same place with her child, and she would mourn. And then one day in the evening she went to this place. She had been grieving for a long time, days beyond count. And this time she went in the evening to sit there and to cry and grieve. And the physical presence, the debris of her grief had accumulated in the moss and had taken physical form. And this time when she sat down to grieve, to cry, she heard a baby's cry, and she looked, and there, emerging from the moss and the waste of her tears, was an infant child, a baby. And she picked the baby up, and she took clean moss, and she wiped the baby off. And she took the child to the beach, and she bathed the child in the sacred ocean. And that child alleviated her suffering. It took away her pain, and her mind was healed. I wanted to share this memory of past pandemics with you because you are our kin, because we have a shared future, and we can share more than our land. We can share who we are, we can share our culture, and we can share a beautiful future filled with hope. Haichka to Nishkwawan. Thank you for what is in your heart for joining us.
Thank you so much, Queston. We are honored to have you with us today and as a guest and settler on this land. I, too, and my colleagues at the Multicultural Advisory Council do give a lot of importance to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and use that as a framework to guide our anti-racism and multicultural practices. We are delighted to have with us tonight John Horgan, Premier of British Columbia, and Kang, Minister of Citizens, Services, and responsible for multiculturalism. Over these past month, the Multicultural Advisory Council and numerous other organizations have had the honor to discuss with Premier Horgan and Minister Kang on the concerns communities have about racism, especially anti-Asian racism since COVID-19. The Premier and Minister Kang have been very responsive, very proactive, and adamant that racism has no place in BC, no place in Canada. They are also spearheading practical steps to ensure a safer, more welcoming, and more inclusive province for all of us. At this time, it is my pleasure to welcome Premier Horgan to the stage.
Thank you, Ismail, and thank you, Melanie, for co-chairing the Multicultural Advisory Council and providing guidance to government on the challenging times ahead, particularly when it comes to anti-racism policies that we want to implement within government and across British Columbia. I'm joining you today from the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation. I represent in the legislature the territory of the Sauk, Pacheedaht, and Siano peoples on the west coast of Vancouver Island, also Coast Salish peoples. I want to thank Queston for getting us started in a good way and telling us the stories of the story of the Musqueam people who have been here for time immemorial and welcomed all of us settlers from every corner of the globe to British Columbia, where we can make a better province for everyone. Today, as we honor the award winners of the Multicultural Anti-Racism Awards, it's particularly important that we acknowledge not just those that are selected as the winners this evening, but all those that were nominated. And indeed, also recognize and acknowledge regular people who are standing up to racism as it starts to emerge in a more graphic and, in fact, a more horrific way during the pandemic of COVID-19. We have seen absolutely grotesque images of violence against individuals because of the color of their skin, taunts of anti-racism or taunts of racism towards Indigenous peoples who were interpreted to be of Asian descent. So the racism doesn't even know what it's talking about. It is just stupidity and ignorance. And when anyone stands up to that, regular citizens or those who we are honoring this evening, I think it sends a clear and direct message to all British Columbians that we are all in this together to overcome the COVID-19 crisis. We are also all in it together to erase racism in British Columbia. We are a province that was first inhabited by Indigenous peoples, as I said, for time immemorial. And over the past 150 years, people from every corner of the globe have come to settle here to make a better life for themselves and their families. I'm the son of an Irish immigrant, and I am very fiercely proud to be a British Columbian because of the diversity that is the strength of our province. We are the envy of Canada currently because of the good work we have all done to bend the curve when it comes to COVID-19. And I would like to think that we're also a symbol of how we can have genuine reconciliation with Indigenous peoples by passing the Declaration Act, which we did unanimously in our legislature last fall. We will also remember, of course, the challenges with the Wet'suwet'en territory and the differences between the people in that region, and also the differences between peoples of different faiths across the north. These are challenges that will not be erased by the passage of legislation. They will not be erased by a giving out of awards, but they will be erased over time when people of goodwill reach out to each other in a sense of love and harmony rather than hate and disrespect. I believe we are very fortunate to be in British Columbia at this point in our history. The challenges before us are significant, but the tolerance and goodness of the public shines through. And although we see on our televisions and on our internet feeds, we see images and examples of racism, we also see an overwhelming amount of love and hope and tolerance and respect. And on this night of all nights, as we celebrate the work of British Columbians to defeat racism, I think it's important that we think of those positive moments that we find on our televisions and on the internet. Oftentimes, I tell my children, do not read the comments under any circumstances. The internet is filled with hate. It's filled with toxins, but it's also filled with hope and filled with love. And we as discerning individuals have to find that hope, find that love, and shine a light on it. And that's what these awards are about tonight. Shining light on people in British Columbia who are doing their part to defeat racism, particularly in this most difficult of times. I want to thank all those who were nominated for the work that you've been doing. I want to thank those who will be selected as winners in the various categories. But most importantly, I want to say that we all need to be the role models that we expect others to be. This is an opportunity to shine light on the goodness in British Columbia. We'll do that this evening, but we have to do it not just this evening, every single day. Thank you, thank you, thank you for the work that you've been doing, to the Advisory Council for your hard work in making difficult choices and selecting from a collection of outstanding individuals and organizations. I lift my hands to all of you. Haishka to everyone. Have a good evening and congratulations. Let's resolve at the end of the evening to redouble our efforts to make British Columbia a tolerant, inclusive jurisdiction founded by First Nations, inhabited by peoples from around the world, and our guiding principles and values are love, hope, and respect.
Thank you, Premier Horgan. That was amazing. I would now like to invite Anne Kang, Minister of Citizen Services and responsible for multiculturalism. Minister Kang.
Sorry, technical difficulty. Hello, everyone. Good evening. It is so wonderful to take part in these awards from my home in Burnaby, in the territory of the Coast Salish peoples. And I want to thank Quest Queston for his gracious welcome. What a wonderful story. Thank you so much. I still see images in my head. I am thrilled to be joining Premier John Horgan and all the awards finalists for this very first live stream of the Multicultural and Anti-Racism Awards. Originally, we were going to hold these awards in March, but because of COVID-19 outbreak, this event had to be delayed for the safety and health of all the participants. So I'm so pleased that to thank today's technology, we are able to go forward with these awards. As Minister responsible for multiculturalism, I have the privilege of being part of a government that is resolute in its commitment to end acts of hate and to build a more inclusive and welcoming province for everyone. This night is about honoring the incredible important contributions of British Columbians who are enhancing multiculturalism and actively standing up to racism and hate. Thank you to Melanie Matining and Ismail Traore from the BC Multicultural Advisory Council, who have graciously agreed to be our MCs this evening. You two look fantastic. The Council provides our government with input and guidance on issues of diversity, inclusion, racial oppression, and discrimination. And in 2008, the Council established a Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism Awards, an event to provide well-deserved recognition to people dedicated to fighting racism, hate, and discrimination. This year, we received 45 nominations, all of which were model examples of people, organizations, and businesses that are doing outstanding work in the community in support of multiculturalism and anti-racism efforts. This work is so important to our province. It is crucial as a society that we do all that we can to fight racism and uphold the principles of equality, of inclusion, and mutual respect. For as much as we have to celebrate, there's still much left to be done to advance multiculturalism and anti-racism in British Columbia. It is extremely upsetting to hear about the sharp rise in recent acts of cruelty and violence against people of Asian heritage during the COVID-19 outbreak. Acts that are fueled by ignorance, fear, and hate. These incidents should never happen, and it's especially hurtful during Asian Heritage Month in BC, a time dedicated to honoring people of Asian descent for their many contributions to our province. Our government is working hard to create a safe, welcoming, inclusive society where everyone is treated with dignity and with respect. I am proud of the work we've accomplished over the past year. This past summer, our government led a province-wide consultation on racism and hate. What we have learned directly informed the design of Resilience BC, a program that was announced during Multiculturalism Week last fall. Resilience BC is a province-wide anti-racism network that will support partners in 40 communities across the province in their work to eliminate racism, discrimination, and hate. BC is pioneering in a new approach with this network and is truly becoming a leader across North America in responding to racism. Last fall, we also established a new cross-ministry anti-racism and anti-hate working group to identify more effective ways to address racism in communities. I am extremely proud that BC was the first province in Canada to introduce legislation to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. These are just some of the actions we've taken to challenge racism in our communities and create a more inclusive and welcoming BC. However, our government cannot beat racism alone. We need the involvement and cooperation of all British Columbians. It is going to take everyone, government, organizations, and individuals working at the grassroots level, like the outstanding citizens being recognized tonight. We must also realize that each of us has a role in building a more welcoming and inclusive BC for every person in every community. We're so grateful for all the champions of multiculturalism who work hard each and every day to make this a reality. This night is about honoring all that you do. And a little later, I look forward to announcing this year's award recipients of the 2020 Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism Awards. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Kang, for being so resolute against acts of racism and hate, and working so openly with the council to bring about community-level change through the Resilience BC, and also systemic change through the many efforts your ministry is spearheading. As the Premier mentioned, this award ceremony not only acknowledges individuals, but also the context and the multiple other people that these individuals exist in, who support and enable them to do inclusion and anti-racism work. And so even though awards go to individuals, they're truly a recognition of the multiple determinants in people's lives that allow them to be great inclusive workers. We are thrilled to have Johnny D. Trinh with us this evening. Johnny Trinh is an interdisciplinary and spoken word artist based in Vancouver. He strives to foster a sense of empowerment, agency, and compassion through socially engaged, community-based art. Johnny recognizes that many of us are uninvited guests on this Indigenous Turtle Island and continually works to reconcile that through accountability, allyship, and integrity in practice. He creates opportunities to support marginalized communities cultivate their voice. Johnny will be providing a special performance in honor of this occasion. Up to you now, Johnny.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that. It's an honor to be here. I want to thank the team at the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture from the Multiculturalism branch for this opportunity in doing this work. I'm originally from Ontario, living in a few places, but primarily the traditional lands of the Mississauga, the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. Then I moved to Regina, Saskatchewan on Treaty 4 territory, which is the traditional lands of the Cree and Dakota and Dene peoples. Finally landing here in beautiful British Columbia, in Vancouver, in the traditional ancestral unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. All along the way, I learned more and more about my own Chinese, Vietnamese ancestry that has been connected to this land. And I learned so much about solidarity and the deep relationship between First Nations and Asian communities, and many times when diverse cultures have stood together. Whenever I get the microphone, I say this one thought. It takes a community to build an artist, whether you're nurtured by it or you resist against it. And I have a passion for supporting art and storytelling and change making. I want to thank everyone in this room, especially the nominees for the work you're doing in resisting norms and that oppress us. And for everyone who's nurturing a community of change makers. I'm excited about the stories that we're going to create together. And thanks to the production team and also the ASL team who's helping to make this more accessible. So thanks for that. I was asked to write something powerful that could recognize the current struggles we're facing, the anti-Asian racism, especially during this Asian Heritage Month, and then at the same time write something that was uplifting and celebratory of the amazing work being recognized tonight. Now I'm going to do that. So I know I'm going to, I lost my poem there. I'm going to write a poem about, something that's joyous but often has drama, weddings. So I thought I'd write some vows for you. Hopefully you enjoy. It's a bit heavy, but I hope you like it. All right. I, queer person of color, acknowledge you, colonial systems of oppression, to be my unlawfully unwedded cellmate, to have and to hold accountable for the many crimes against humanity when you turned community into colony, compassion to capitalism, Chinatown to Chinese Immigration Act, cowards and conmen to commanders-in-chief who dangled citizenship and freedom if we paid $50 a head with no families in sight, who dangled sovereignty of stolen land, sipped tea while we robbed of dignity, dug trenches and built division, who dangled empty promises that did little to keep us warm at night. We found warmth around the fires of the first people who rescued us along the Fraser River. We found strength in shared wisdom and filial piety. We learned that your new world lies covered old world roots with ancestors immemorial. We learned the dangers of the written word, where our brushstrokes were replaced by scratch marks and permissions were replaced by forged X's on dotted lines like pipelines replacing railroads. We learned how quickly we revert to these things in 2020. For better or for worse, baited by pipe dreams of profit, or I can deliver your food, but take the fever back to China. Preaching diversity and equality, commissioned to write poems about racism, breaking barriers and winning awards, subverting reparations with reconciliation, apologies and land appraisal, empty homes, equity loans. Equity is the gravity of this work, polarized by the gravity of this world. Equity's lifting of hands while we have fallen flat. We're trying to flatten the curve while flattening the structure. I didn't know when flat lines became the lowest common denominator. Death is a flat line, and we've been trying to raise the dead. For richer or for poor, from huts and hollows to housing market heists, from crazy rich Asians to seniors collecting cans, panhandling on Main Street. We are complicit in the crimes. These vows are not meant to be just you versus I. We share a sickness. I need help. In sickness and in health, we were already sick when we couldn't share fountains. We were sick when we were only allowed to walk through back doors and tunnels underneath the floor. We were sick when we couldn't gather greater than 3. We were sick when you brought blankets and smallpox on purpose. Is it any different on sky trains or under streetlights? When martial law sequesters the poor who have no option to rest, when have we ever been more essential to maintain your lifestyle, let alone our survival? I have spent my life in fear of a virus. Millions have died from dirty money, unclean hands, and unprotected violence. We know this model minority story ends. We know temporary distance is possible. We learn that prevention is a cure. A virus has ripped away the illusion of supply and demand. A virus has depleted the needed supplies in demand, and people are still flushing paper towels down toilets. Soon enough, there will be no bliss in ignorance. If we're not careful, there won't be the privilege of ignorance or bliss, or any of us left, till death do us part. We have been invoking the missing, the murdered, the sick, and the dead, trying to raise the bar, looking for the cure. The cure is knowledge, not fear, that fills the space we keep between us, so that apart we are still together. The cure is a screen through which we see brown skin, Black lives, First Nations, these eyes, side by side, beside white allies, witnessing this work, celebrating the cells that we share. And to this, I say I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. That was truly an amazing and moving performance. I want to encourage all the viewers out there to purchase Johnny's album, Undeniable, from their website at johnnydavidtrin.com. And that's a double N on Johnny. So now we've come to the highlight of the evening, the presentation of this year's Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism Awards. Now, before I get started, I wanted to thank the Multicultural Awards Committee for coming together and making all the hard decisions for us, as Premier Horgan mentioned. Every year we receive numerous nominations, and I know choosing tonight's recipients was particularly quite hard. So tonight we'll be presenting 3 awards. The first award will be the Intercultural Trust Award. It recognizes 2 recipients for their outstanding work in building intercultural trust and understanding and reducing racism and hate between communities. The second award announced tonight will be the Breaking Barrier Award, which is given to 2 recipients for their outstanding work in tackling systemic or institutional racism and reducing barriers for communities that have been marginalized. Finally, the third award announced tonight will be the Emerging Leader Award. This award is presented to an outstanding youth or young adult, aged 15 to 30, also for their tremendous work in building intercultural trust, tackling racism, and reducing barriers for communities that have been marginalized. This award is accompanied by a $5,000 grant to be donated to an organization of the recipient's choice. And I do want to mention again, I know that Ismail also mentioned it, that while we're recognizing individuals tonight, it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge the web of communities that surround and support these leaders that make the initiatives mentioned tonight possible. Movements are a collective force. They are built upon relationships across experiences, generations, and identities. Tonight, we also celebrate everyone doing the necessary work that brings our communities towards healing, right relations, and social justice. Now I'm going to bring it back to Minister Kang without further delay to announce the recipients of the awards.
Thank you so much. Before we begin, I want to emphasize how incredibly impressed we are with all the outstanding work being accomplished. These awards are not a contest or a competition. It's not about who is winning and who is not winning an award tonight. I would like once again to commend all 45 nominees. I'm inspired by the scope of work and dedication reflected in each of the submissions. All of you will be receiving a certificate in recognition of your excellent work in support of multicultural and anti-racism efforts in your community. Now, for tonight's presentation of the awards, the Intercultural Trust Award, I will begin with the Intercultural Trust Award. Again, we received 17 nominations from across BC in this category. From this impressive group of organizations and individuals, there are 4 finalists. The honorable mentions are Steve Lorenzo Bailey and Vancouver Holocaust Education. And this year's 2 award recipients are Debleka Gwen and Naji Yazdi. Debleka is joining us from their home to tell us more about their work.
Hi, I am very, very grateful to have had the privilege of doing 25 years of work alongside many inspiring collaborators here on unsurrendered Penelakut territory, and also very honored to have this work acknowledged through this award. AIMS is essentially, it's all about centering and amplifying the voices of marginalized youth and echoing out their visions, their mood stories into the wide world to prompt ripples of change. And it's very rewarding. It means a lot to have this quite exhausted, acknowledged through this award. But I love the day with kind of work isn't regarded as exceptional. When tracking deeply held biases in nature, when being a list of the privileges we hold and sometimes hold over others is optional, when speaking out against racism and colonialism is widely applauded and not vilified, when Indigenous land defenders are treated as heroes and not criminals, when the emotional labor of this uphill work is more evenly distributed. It is my hope that the light being shone on those few is going to ultimately be reflected through the efforts of many, whether that's championing fair and just policies, naming and challenging the systems and mindsets that maintain fear and inequities, having courageous conversation, or having the gumption and courage to examine our own prejudice. We need all hands on deck and all men are calling out to achieve critical mass and turn the tide. I hold my hands high to all of the young creative change makers, the emerging creative change makers that I have the privilege of working with, who are blazing trails and doing more than their fair share of the heavy lifting in this work. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Bleka. And now, Naji, can you tell us more about your work and what this award means to you?
Thank you, Mr. Kang. Thanks for having included in this wonderful online ceremony this afternoon. I suppose that this continues to be the new norm for a while. I feel honored and proud to receive the Intercultural Trust Award. Honorable Premier Horgan and very distinguished guests, I would like to start with acknowledging the territory of the Lekwungen people that live on Victoria, British Columbia. My name is Naji Yazdi, and my family and I came to Canada from Iran about 7 years ago. We feel so lucky and happy to live in a free country and to be able to raise our kids in a beautiful place like Canada. It is a blessing, which we remain grateful forever for the privilege. I would like to share with you a short letter that I have written to my son, who is watching me online from Willows Beach now. Hi, Max. And the reason I have put these words to get on paper is that I believe racism starts from homes. And what parents teach their children about different cultures, it's on us, not just to put a stop and end on racist teachings. They start to raise kids with those values that creates trust, love, and respect. My dear son, Mahboud, you are so lucky to grow up in a beautiful country where equality is one of the highest values. Leaders set the tone, and Canada's leaders advocate multiculturalism and believe diversity is a gift and brings a strength Canada can use. As I said before, the color of people's heart and soul are very important, and the color of their skin, or the color of their hair, or the color of their eyes. Be aware of the cultural differences, implementing that knowledge toward being a good friend, both, and being a nice human. Be aware of the cultural differences with the purpose of being respectful to other people from different backgrounds. Don't use your knowledge about cultural differences for humiliation or for making judgment toward your friends. This is bad. My dear son, treat your friends the way that you like to be treated. This practice alone will make you a trustworthy friend, a nice to work with colleague, and eventually a respected leader. Love others and respect everyone wholeheartedly, and this makes you lovable. Be a nice citizen of Canada and do whatever you can to make your country be proud of you. With love, that. Thank you, Minister Kang, for this opportunity, and I feel so honored and happy to be recipient of this award.
Thank you so much, Naji, and everyone. Let's give Naji an applause. Max and Melody, you must be so proud of your dad. Next, I am pleased to announce the Breaking Barriers Award. For the Breaking Barriers Award, we received 17 remarkable nominations. From amongst a group of 5 nominees, we selected 5 finalists. The honorable mentions are Here, Vancouver LGBTQ Friends Society, Hua Foundation, Indian Summer Art Society. And this year's 2 award recipients are Alvinder Dosanjh and Mariam Chuch from Pacific Immigrant Resource Society. Calvin, I'd like to hear from you on your work and to a few words.
Thank you, Ms. Kang. I'm going to start off with a few words in terms of reciting that are written in the U.S. Holocaust Museum. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I read these words quite a while ago, and it had a tremendous impact on me. Racism is born from ignorance, and this same ignorance is responsible for discriminating against caste, creed, ethnicity, and religion. We all bear social responsibility and moral obligation to break down these barriers. And how to be inspired to break down these barriers? Simply look at the great giants that cast their shadows. It was Nelson Mandela that broke the chains of apartheid. It was Martin Luther King that was this year marching in the civil rights movement. They inspire us, and we need to look at them to change what is going on around us. As a police officer, I have seen a steady proliferation of hate crimes. As a parent, I do not want my children raised in this kind of environment. Either I can wait for it to come, or I can be the change. I've chosen the latter. Kipley Foundation was founded back in 2015 with the guiding principles of cultivating love, respect, and dignity, and fostering friendship and understanding. This award is a testament to all the hard work of all the volunteers that continuously go out and foster this understanding and show communities that it is only through diversity and inclusiveness and respect for one another that we can all grow together. I want to thank panelists. I want to thank Premier Horgan, Minister Kang, and all other honorable ministers for showing me with this tremendous honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And Maria, I would also like to invite you to share your story with us.
Thank you, Minister Kang. I apologize for the technical thing. So I'm honored to receive this award on behalf of Pacific Immigrant Resources Society staff, board, and volunteers. PIRS started out 45 years ago as an organization to support the needs of Chinese immigrant women in Chinatown. We were working to break down the barriers then, and we're working to break down the barriers now. PIRS programs are often the turning point for many who are looking for support, connection, and mentoring. I want our partners and funders to support PIRS and the work we do, and thank you for this wonderful acknowledgement of the talent, passion, creativity, and drive of the many people who make up our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Our final award recognizes a young person between the ages of 15 to 30 for their outstanding work in building intercultural trust, tackling racism, or reducing barriers for marginalized communities. We received 13 great nominations in this category. From this amazing group of young British Columbians, there are 3 finalists. Emerging Leader Award. Honorable mentions are Dylan Cohen, and Tamil Campos. And this year's recipient is Boma Brown. As a recipient of this award, Boma will receive a grant of $5,000 she will be able to donate to the organization of her choice to further the work of promoting multiculturalism and anti-racism in her community. Boma has chosen to present this grant to the Victoria Immigrant and Refugee Centre Society, VIRCS, which is the ministry's new Resilience BC Anti-Racism Network Coordinator. As a newcomer to Canada, Boma and her family used the services, and she is immensely grateful for the work that they do. Our government shares Boma's appreciation for the work that VIRCS does. As a newly selected service provider for Resiliency, VIRCS will be able to help communities grow their capacity to respond to incidents of racism and hate at the local level. I look forward to sharing more about Resilience BC in the coming weeks. Let's now hear from Boma, this year's Emerging Leader Award recipient. Boma.
Thank you, Minister Kang, and thank you, Premier Horgan. I would like to start off by acknowledging that I am on unceded Lekwungen and Missanabie territories in beautiful Victoria. I'm really honored to be selected for this award, and I know that although this award is for the work that I do with the Support Network for Indigenous Women and Women of Color, I think this is an award for organization. The Support Network, known as NEWOC, is an organization that fights to provide equitable access to healthcare. We've been talking about systemic racism all day, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that systemic racism really affects people's access to healthcare. NEWOC works to provide culturally sensitive healthcare by training medical professionals. We also acknowledge the fact that newcomers to Canada face isolation, and so we provide community dinners and make sure that newcomers to Canada, specifically women of color, Indigenous women as well, have a community in the cities that they live. We provide services in Victoria and Vancouver. I think on the subject of racism, I think it's really also important to acknowledge the fact that marginalized women, Black, Indigenous women, women of color face really poor health outcomes, and in turn that affects employment and affects a lot of aspects of our life. So the fact that SMOC has been recognized for the work that we do in BC is really important to me. And so thank you so much for the award. I really appreciate it. And thank you for acknowledging the work that women of color and Indigenous women are doing to make sure that we have equitable access to reproductive care.
Thank you very much, Minister Kang. Indeed, as you mentioned, these awards are not a contest or a competition, but a recognition and acknowledgement. Congratulations to this year's recipients and to everyone who was nominated. Your accomplishments speak to the fact that in the same way that it took solutions and a great many people to create a racialized society, where skin color is used to discriminate against people and to privilege others, it would also be through a comprehensive and cross-sectoral collective effort that we will combat racism in our communities and build a fully inclusive and welcoming province. It's been an honor and a privilege to be part of this special event. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you to my co-host, Melanie, co-chair of the Multicultural Advisory Council. From me to all of you, keep on and remember, in the great words of Dr. Cornel West, justice is what love looks like in practice. To close this ceremony, we would like to once again invite question for final blessings and remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ismail. Our form of prayer at Musqueam is different than industrial cultures, than people of the book. It's more like a lecture, so please indulge me. I just want to say how impressed I am with all the participants in this ceremony and the winners, champions, every one of them. And I'd like to explain why it's so important. In our culture, in Musqueam, our oldest laws come from the time before the last ice age. One of those laws is that we are all one family under a blue sky like we have today. That is the roof of our house, and we are all brothers and sisters in that home. Another of our oldest laws is that the world is in a continuous state of transition and that this is normal. When I was young and I would go shopping in Dunbar neighborhood with my elders, if we were in store and white people came in, we had to wait while they shopped, completed their transaction. Then we could finish our purchases. In 1986, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was extended to First Nations. And I asked our lawyers, what does that mean? And our lawyers responded by saying, it means that you're now fully human in Canadian law. So I've seen a lot of change in my lifetime. And I find that very important, very encouraging. We teach that every person travels through eternity to be reincarnated, born again and again. And they also travel through daily life in a metaphor that we call the soul canoe. Because we're all family, when we come together like this, it's our law that we're meeting on a family beach. And we come together like this on a family beach, a journey through eternity that we take in our individual soul canoes. We warm ourselves at the heart of loving people as though it were a fire. And the words that we share, they are offered as paddles for the canoe of our family members. What Dundas is so important, words he opened statement with, words from the Holocaust Museum. Those have genuine meaning to me. First Nations were able to vote in provincial elections as a result of changes in the world that occurred after the Second War. The most decorated unit in the British Empire were those Chinese Canadians from British Columbia who served behind enemy lines and received more mentions and dispatches and more citations and medals per person than any other unit in the British Empire. And the fellow veterans wanted that acknowledged, and they approached the government and they said, you should extend the provincial franchise, the right to vote, to these Chinese Canadian veterans. And because those people were heroes, when they received this offer, this was their reply. They said, we will gladly accept this privilege you have offered us if you also extend that offer to Indians. That's what we're called. So that's how First Nations got the right to vote in British Columbia. Because there was somebody left to speak up for us. Because in Muslim, you're all my relatives. You are Siaya. You are my kin. In our law, we are obliged to protect you, to protect your property. So when British Columbia moves to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, do not be afraid. We will follow our law. Our first lawgiver who came to us came at the beginning of this geological epoch. His name was Kang. Before he came, we still gained nature because we didn't know our own nature. The gifts he brought us were empathy, compassion, charity, and forgiveness. And we follow those laws today. My mother went to residential school, and she was sent to the Coquilita Indian Experimental Hospital. And she was placed in a control group for biomedical experiments. And all the other children in that control group with her were the children of chiefs and medicine men. And partially as a result of those experiments, I lost her when I was quite young. But she remembered our laws. And she called me to her deathbed. And she told me that I must forgive the people who had done that to her, because she had forgiven them. And she reminded me that this was Chal's law, the law that was brought to us when Tawasin was an island, before there was a Richmond or Surrey Flat. A law that was brought to us at the beginning of this geological age. And that was the hardest thing I had to do, follow our law. But it freed me. It made me a better person. And the work that is done here today parallels the teaching of our ancestors from so long ago. The work that has been done here today to bring people together as one family. That makes me so proud of British Columbia. It makes me so proud of those people who've changed the land Canada that I was born into. I'm so proud that the work they have done is being continued today. And not just by one or two people. Not just here and there. Those people, unsung heroes who are nominated, who are champions of equality and human rights. It just happened that they didn't award today. Their work is their award. It is a better society. It is a better province. It is a better future. It is hope born from despair. I say that from personal experience. There was a time when I traveled from one reserve to another as though they were islands in a sea, because there was no love in between those reserves. But that time is gone. The leadership that has changed Canada doesn't come just from a premier, just from a cabinet minister. The leadership that is changing Canada and British Columbia today comes from individuals who work quietly in their daily life to set an example for their children, for their family, for the ones they love. And so I am very grateful to have met some of you today. I'm very grateful that this ceremony occurred, that it wasn't postponed any longer. And I thank you all for bringing your good hearts to the work you do, to this celebration, and to our future. Hi, Tep Tanishkwalwin. Thank you for what is in your hearts. We are moving towards a complex negotiation. At the same time, we are trying to envision the new normal. And it is very reassuring to see that these two important social transitions occur simultaneously, and that they are supporting one another in the changes that are necessary to continue the continuous transitions that are the normal for the world. When I first read the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, I felt grateful that my ancestors had preserved law and made sure it was part of my homework. Told me when I came to my senses that I could carry our law. Because that document expresses the same universal values of our ancestors that come from what we call the myth days. Those values, laws, teachings, traditions, and customs that come from the previous geological epoch, that were passed down from generation to generation for almost 90,000 years. In the ancient past, in that distant time, we truly were all one family. Demographic pressure, wars, industrialization have broken the connection of industrial people with the land, have separated and divided our family. But now there is an awareness of self, of environment, of connection to the land, of our dependence on our brothers and sisters, on our neighbors, that is restoring what was lost through the industrial process. So as we go through this period of transition, the behaviors we use establish the behaviors that will be our next phase of life. And just as the child of sorrow was born into joy after grief, the work that you have done will bring us a far better new normal. I want to thank you all and have a good night.